Warren Pike's pushed more and far up ahead. He's got out of line. Is now Pike going to have a go at Werrell? Don't push him off. He's in the championship fight. Jack Werrell chasing down Carl Jacklin. Further down, Rob Williams and Chris Barnes.
Sensational run outside line now though for the heavy braking zone. Around the outside goes the Audi R8.
Look how much Miller's come back into play. Exactly. Miller's still such up. He's touched on second and change. All of a sudden, Miller's back in play.
Does he have it? Medeiros is going to get it.
Oh, they're going to toss it. They haven't got it.
He's on the outside line though, going into the fastest corner on the circuit. Surely this can't work.
Dominic Ligner has got a sensational run outside line now though for the heavy braking zone. Around the outside goes the Audi R8.
Look how much Miller's come back into play. Exactly. Miller's still such up. He's touched on second and change. All of a sudden, Miller's back in play.
Can Barry do it? Big Barry's going to do it. Big Barry!
And over to the gameplay. Let's go.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the opening race of Tier 2 here for Season 12 of PRL. We're back at Imola, just as we were last night for Tier 1. But we've got 19 drivers hungry to pick up some early championship points as they fly their way around the Imola circuit, just as the Tier 1 boys and girls did last night. My name is Darragh, Thacker, once again, joined by Joshua Griffin Meeks in the commentary booth. And Josh, again, we're back at Imola. Welcome along.
Thank you.
Early stages qualifying again, more drivers, maybe more carnage. But strategy, we've seen it yesterday. The drivers may have watched the race yesterday. They might have a good idea of what to do in the race.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, if they were watching the race, they would have seen the drivers who started on the medium compound tyre have a brilliant first run. But of course, having the fact of two safety cars coming out and interrupting sort of the ebb and flow of a race and what was necessarily going on here and there, certainly would have may have just given them a little heads up of what they could potentially expect tonight. Of course, we do have a slightly larger grid than last night, but there are a few returning names who decided to fill in as reserves last night. and that being the current driver, sitting all the way in P19 at the minute in the Aston Martin of Crew Streamers, and Don Moore, who's currently finding himself P5 in that Sauber car. So they've had a little bit more time, a little bit more race preparation, let's say. Could we potentially see them changing their strategy from what they did last night, maybe having a different approach slightly? Especially given, as well, we've seen so many penalties, so many track warnings popping up on the screen, so many penalties here and there. And the matter of fact is, you know, the podium was decided on penalties. Are those drivers from last night, who are also racing tonight, going to be able to take that knowledge into this race and kind of keep their noses a little bit cleaner?
Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of these drivers will know that, you know, you can see often quite a little bit of jockeying for position, should we say, some hard racing around Imola. We saw quite a lot of it down at Tamburello, and I think these guys will know. They've got to be careful. End of the DRS straight, trying to make a move or trying to defend their position. There's always that risk of being spun around facing the wrong way and losing tons of positions, especially if you're near the side of the race, or a restart, of course, post safety car. But we've got our first laps in at the moment, and so far it's just Komi-san in the Alpha Tauri who is leading the way with a 15.1, which is an incredibly good time. I mean, there's only 3 drivers in the 1 minute 15s at the moment, isn't there?
Yeah, of course. Realistically as well, I feel like we're going to have to give Rapid Go for TV, currently in P7 in the Haas car, a little bit of leeway, obviously doing the lap time on that medium set of compound, maybe just getting a little bit of race prep underway, maybe getting a couple of these banker laps on the board just to make sure he's always got something to fall back on, which could be certainly a strategy to go forward, but it's not a typical one we would see in these esport races that we quite often see, where drivers really try and protect their tyres heading into the race. So it's certainly something bold from Rapid, but I'm excited to see how it's going to play out as well. Needless to mention as well, we don't have these big packs of cars going around on circuit at the same time. Everyone's got a slightly different run plan, which has kind of split up where the drivers are starting their laps, where they're finishing it, and increases the risk of them potentially getting caught up in traffic, like we saw last night as well, with a collision in the qualifying heading through Villeneuve.
Yeah, that was near the end of qualifying, wasn't it? I think it was the Red Bull just not aware that the Alpha Tauri was coming up. I think it was Eric, actually, that got blocked, was coming up behind him, and yeah, it can happen. Especially at a tight track like Imola, there isn't too much room around the circuit. I think Crazy has just backed off on his lap in this Williams car, so he's not going to complete it. I do think that the next driver on a lap is going to be Mythbusters in the Haas. As he runs up towards Piratella now, as he dives his way down. It's such a fun corner, isn't it, Piratella?
Yes.
You've got to carry all the momentum, and the curbs kind of, they don't really bounce you out, they just kind of work with you around Piratella, don't they?
Yeah, of course, as well, and as soon as you get out of Piratella, you've got to think, heading into Acqua Minerale, there's not a complex of corners like on the Formula 1 calendar, or even in the world. It's fantastic being able to put any car through there, let alone a car with such high downforce as these Formula 1 cars. It must absolutely feel like super glue when you flick the car in on the first right-hander, and then slowly start to apply the brakes. But of course, Imola, we know it, we mentioned it yesterday, and we'll mention it again tonight for those of you who are joining us. It's such a technical circuit. There's so much time you can be, which you can find just from taking a slightly different line through the Tamarella chicane, through Villeneuve, making sure you get a proper exit out of Tosa. There's so many small intricacies which really help build onto the lap time. But if 1 or 2 drivers slowly start adapting out of these qualifying runs, they can find a handful of time, 2, 3, 4 attempts, which realistically, similar to what we saw yesterday, can jump them up a good few positions.
Yeah, tight qualifying sessions are often quite exciting. I mean, looking at it now, Craggy in P5, all the way down to Crew Steamers in P9. There is just over half a tenth between those 4 drivers. It is really close in there. Oh, as I've just seen, I think we've all seen, yes. CJQ just extending Acqua Minerale. It's another thing about Acqua Minerale, of course, like you mentioned, it's difficult. It's so easy to extend there, just to push the car a little bit too hard, of course. With the way that the cars, as you said, like run through the first part of the corner, they can just lose a bit of downforce, and then it can just mean for the second part, you don't have that mechanical grip to turn you in the way you'd like to, and so you can just drift a little bit wide. And in the race especially, because you've got a lot of warnings picked up there, therefore penalties, and therefore maybe some positions lost as well. So Gonna be something I'm going to have to keep tabs on, but I mean, there's lots to do. There's lots to think about at Imola because it is just a track that just every corner has some kind of issue for you when you're driving.
Yeah, it's the reason why I believe a lot of drivers like it as well, because it's always just that consistent challenge. It's not necessarily like a Sector 2 in Bahrain where it's got horrible, awkward, clunky and difficult corners. It's very quick, it's very flowing, but again, you have to have that level of precision to navigate these Formula 1 cars through. Thinking like Aqua Minerale, I mean, even Piratella as well, the load that you're putting on the front end of a car when you end up hopping onto the brakes, all it takes is maybe a small gust of wind, maybe a little bit of dirty air, and all of a sudden you're having to release that entire front load to be able to get the car turned in, and then that's when we start seeing the rear of a car start to slip and slide. Very similar to what we saw one of the Mercs do last night, almost drifting around every single corner, purely because they weren't able to get the load off the front of the car and shift it safely back to the rear of the car in order to get the power down. It was still loaded up the front before they were trying to get the power down, and that's something which is heavily setup orientated. But it is certainly something that we can definitely keep an eye on for a lot of these drivers, because something which I've noticed in comparison to yesterday's qualifying, I should say, the drivers seem to be a lot more cautious when applying that, the throttle, and making sure, the rears don't spin, they don't get in a horrible situation. But again, realistically, are you going to be able to find those 2, 3, 4 temps from nursing the rear of a car, from dancing it through in a very technical manner? Sometimes it could be a quicker way to drive, but around a circuit like Imola, you've kind of got to go for it.
You do, and we saw that Mercedes, of course, I think you're referencing yesterday, where there was far more facing sideways than they were facing forward. So, they do seem to be a little bit more stable, whether it's application of throttle, whether it's maybe just, tighter wings on the setup. You can often see that, because I've seen some setups where the wings could be, say, 40-28, and you've got a 12-wing difference. But some others, you might say a 35-32, and they're often more stable on the rear. So we might be seeing more setups like that, but you never know who's to say. I did notice that Finbop has moved himself up onto the front row provisionally with a 15.3 in the Ferrari, and his teammate De Silva is going to come up towards the line as well. Not yet set a lap time in his first effort, but some P15, so he'll be hoping for a little bit more. But he's currently P15. I think he'll have enough time to come back in, go back out again, and set one more flying lap. But I think we're in this little period now in qualifying where we're waiting for everyone to start their final runs. Of course, many people, like you mentioned before, have different run plans, but generally they're all centered around getting that last lap in once the flag is flying. So I think we might see quite a few soon. But one man I do see on a lap is Dom War, and he's currently P8, but he's just about down in his time. But there's really not much in it.
Yeah, I mean, this final sector as well, depending on how you could handle the curbs at Variant Alta, making sure you are on 60 frames per second to get the maximum benefit heading over the curbs to lose as little time as possible is going to be a great aid in order to try and find that little bit of added time. You can see him run really wide on the exit of the first corner there, heading towards the end of the track, just to try and open up the steering angle to be able to get that flow through, because as we mentioned yesterday, as I'm sure we'll mention and notice throughout the entire course of his qualifying and race, the long straight here for the start-finish straight is ridiculous. The slipstream, the ERS and the DRS all play a pivotal part in being able to sort out your lap time and really try and close up to the cars around you, to the cars in front, to find those 1 or 2 temps which you could do. To perhaps maybe find yourself, if you're, let's say, CJ here, jumping all the way from P5, potentially to P2. There's a lot to be gained by having a, less draggy car and a less draggy setup down that straight. It makes it easier to overtake, but on the same token, it's going to make it a lot harder to follow the cars through these fast-flowing corners that we've mentioned before. And again, if it makes the car unstable on a qualifying run with less fuel, with slightly pressured tyres, could it potentially be playing more into heading towards that 2-stop, like we saw yesterday with a couple drivers initially going for it before the safety car came out?
And of course, Imola is a track where we see a lot of drivers get stuck in trains, as Rapid OG just popped himself up into P7 on the timing tower with a 15.7. But no, we see a lot of trains here at Imola, so a 2-stop, there's something to be said about it. Because if you start getting stuck in the train, you might be maybe 4th or 5th back in the train. You have that DRS, but you're not really able to use it very well because everyone in front of you has also got DRS. They may be fighting and holding you up. A 2-stop might just give you the chance to to work your way with an undercut, to work your way through, you might have more pace over the course of the race. And yeah, there's something to be said about that, I think, for some of these guys. And some of them might have a look at it as we run through the race. But at the moment, I think you can just see on the minimap, everyone's starting to file their way out of the pit lane. There is a lot of cars, a lot of drivers that we're hoping to get onto the track pretty soon as the timer does tick down. 2:20 on the clock. PRL De Silva, I should say, is coming around the final corner, but I don't believe there's another lap being set. No, there's not, and I think that's going to be session over for the Ferrari. But yeah, you can see a lot of drivers in out laps, a few more still to come as well, and we're going to have a bit of a frantic final couple of minutes here.
Yeah, and something I just want to point out here, MZ has also set a purple sector 1, so he's going to be looking on another lap on these soft compound tyres. He's already took an extra preparation lap to try and get the car into a good window, but he seems to still be finding the pace after initially doing that lap. So whether he's, perhaps took a little bit out of that first sector on the original lap in order to try and keep the tyre temps in that perfect operating window without having to put too much pressure on the car, so he can keep the tyres in good check for this second lap. I feel like that's going to be up for debate, but certainly something which isn't up to debate is the pace he currently has in this Red Bull. Currently finds himself P3, and he's already heading up towards the line here with quite a short lap around Imola, and it's good enough to find himself on pole position with a 1:15 flat. Dare I say, it might be something that we're going to have to look at slightly further in the future if drivers decide to take maybe 2 installation laps. But of course, we are heading into the end of a session now, so we're going to be very limited on whether they can do that or not, which is going to be something which could play a pivotal part in this qualifying session. And Darragh, if I was you, mate, I'm not sure I would necessarily recommend having another installation lap just to get the tyres in perfect temp, but it seems to work for MZ, so why not give it a go?
Yeah, I mean, another argument for it could be that you're just running down the fuel. Of course, sometimes when you put in minimum fuel in the car, at tracks like Monaco, that could just be about 4.5 laps worth of fuel. At other tracks like Spa, it might only be like 2.2 laps or so. So I think they would maybe it's a case of running down the fuel as much as possible. But either way, we are really getting to the business end. There's 19 seconds on the clock, and we've got a few drivers on laps. Finbop is one of those drivers on a lap, and he's coming into Rabatsa 1. I think he's just going to cross the line in time before the checkered flag flies, but he's got a Haas in front of him. He's coming into the pit lane. Did that put him off at all? He was 4 tenths up through the middle sector, but he finds even more, and he's at a 14.7, and that is provisional pole for Finbop. MZ is not going to have a reply, I don't think. No, not at all, as the flag does fly. Quite a few drivers in the mid-pack have already finished their runs. It's just Komi-san and Halo. They're both not going to set another flying lap. We have to look all the way back to the likes of Don War to see if he can improve himself, as that's a move for Alberto, as Halo's been disqualified. I think it's more of a game glitch. That's not ideal for him, as Don Wars is going to improve to P4 onto the second row of the grid, a 15.428 for the Alfa Romeo driver. Then we've got a couple of Aston Martins.
Both of them diving in the pits.
Yeah, so they're not going to improve. Is it just more Monster? Who is improving in the Mercedes car, and where can he go? He goes up to P5, 15.5, great improvement at the end there for him, and I think that might be that, yes, because Rapid Growth is invalidated. We might have a couple more, actually, because there was a bit of a gap. Collateral Zoom's next, but it looks like Finbob may be pretty safe on pole position if Collateral Zoom can't pull incredible lap time out here, and in the end he goes 14th. Patty Pat will run up to the line, and Patty Pat will finish his session in P14, just leapfrogging his teammate. But that really is that, as Finbob comes into the pit lane. But a 14.7, Josh, it's a great lap.
Yeah, it was, just as, to be quite honest with you, it's the same pace as we saw yesterday, which really goes to show the level of depth here at PRL. Regardless, between the two tiers, the drivers which hopped up into Tier 1 had a good showing last night as well. At the back again, I mean, looking at PRL Crew Steamers there in P10. Certainly not a bad run, considering his final lap with the track at its optimal condition, with the most rubber on the circuit. Wasn't able to set a more advanced lap time to try and push himself further up the order. So finishing P10 from initially, a lap done in the middle of a session isn't half bad at all, but I feel like we should run you guys through the order here. We've got Finbap on pole position with a Ferrari, with MZ Plays hot on his heels, 2 temps back in the Red Bull. We got Komi-san in the AlphaTauri for P3, Don War P4, Maraudster in P5, PRL CJ in P6, we got Craigies in P7, Rapido G P8, Mythbusters P9, Crew Steamers P10, Crazy I Do It in P11, Alfredo P12, Alberto P13, Pat P14, Collateral in P15, Rapid Gopher P16, T De Silva in 17th, Vintage AR5 in 18th, and Halo in 19th with that little feature of the game. But something we should probably mention as well is there are points up for grabs in this qualifying session. We've got...
There are 8 points for pole, isn't it? And then
Yes.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 all the way down. So, Finbop, championship leader, already in this in Season 12 in Tier 2 here at PRL. And he'll be hoping to pick up maximum points in the race as well, of course, which will be starting soon. But we do have 10 races in the season. Imola, of course, is the first. We can see, have a quick look at the calendar now. Look at this. We'll have Barcelona next week. In 7 days' time or so, and 6 days for Tier 1, and then Portugal. So it's a little bit of an Iberian double-header. Then we move north in the Netherlands and Austria, and then we leave Europe to go to the Middle East, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar before coming back to Europe, Belgium, and Great Britain. But there are some cool little tracks there. I mean, I'm looking at the likes of Austria, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia. They could be 3 really interesting tracks at an important point in the championship to try and see who will move up the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, realistically, given the fact they've got points for qualifying, we was talking about it yesterday as well, the amount of consistency which is going to be needed over these 10 races. It might not necessarily be an all-out battle to try and get the race wins. It might just be collecting points here in the races, also making sure you get a solid qualifying to get a couple points here and there. Because at the end of the day, the championship will be decided on the very fine margins heading into the likes of Belgium and into Great Britain. But we do have the 5 red lights. And away we go for the race here.
Let's see then. It's a good start for Finbop. That someone didn't move off the line. That's just Komi San. I think he was caught unawares by the race start. We were too, because there was a formation lap yesterday. MZ played is going to try and defend his position for P2 as they run down in towards turn 1 at Tampa. Oh, there's a spin in the mid-pack. There's the McLaren. That is going to be Craggy's around, and he will slip all the way to the back as there are brakes in the train. But Finbop leads us away. MZ and Monster are following him along, but a great start for the pole sitter.
Exactly, and it's got to be something that the Ferrari was definitely looking at trying to go. But you can see here the adaptation from this second split. All of them seem to have decided to opt for the medium compound tyre, which is slightly different from what we saw yesterday. And dare I say, it might have been on the more favourable side of what we saw yesterday, with the drivers starting on the mediums, find themselves in a brilliant window to necessarily try and catch up and keep up the pace with those on the hard tyres, and also be able to stretch it out for as long as they did on the hard tyres as well. You see CJ and Monster having a little bit of a battle through Aqua Minerale, and the Sarabas swapping positions in P5 and P6. But someone I do really want to quickly make a note of, as we've got an Aston Martin round there through Variante Alta, is the fact we've got Crazy I Do It in P11 in the Williams, starting on that hard compound tyre. It's a bold move, considering the rest of the grid's on mediums, but it could pay dividends come the end of this first stint.
Yeah, we'll have to find out whether his gamer tag rings true or not with that strategy. But I think it's a good idea, actually. If he can stick in the train, the race is going to really come back to him. Monster and CJQ are going to be fighting out down towards Tamburello. On lap 2, CJQ putting his nose in right at the end of the straight. But Monster has the position. These two have allowed the front guys to get away by nearly 2.5 seconds. By more than 2.5 seconds now. Inside line now. All bouncing over the curbs for CJQ as they run through Villeneuve chicane. I don't really know why he's fighting this one so hard so early on. The gap up to the top 2 has grown out already to over 3 seconds in only 4 sectors of racing. So an incredible lead that the front 2 have. But a couple of mistakes from the likes of Monster down at Aqua Minerale on lap 1 haven't helped them at all as they run their way through. But we are starting to see where the trains are going to be forming. Alberto Maracucho, he's a little bit further back on Alfredo in the Aston Martin, so he might be a break in the train.
Yeah, and we mentioned yesterday, we'll mention it once again for you joining us for the first time here. The DRS round here is absolutely crucial. It can find you 4 or 5 tenths of a second per lap around here because of how long it is, because of how powerful it is. In combination with the use of a bit of slipstream and a little bit of battery, we could definitely be seeing drivers be swapping positions in a DRS train almost religiously on every single lap. And MZ here is going to be looking just to keep within that range of DRS, because the worst case scenario for MZ here is Finbop breaks that little bit of potential DRS he could get and forces MZ a second back. So then he's in the middle of no man's land, and Monster is slowly going to keep reeling him in with the aid of him and Rapid working together to use a little bit of a DRS, which could definitely work, as we saw last night, with drivers understanding their role, understanding when to pick their battles, and understanding when to really try and get the overtake sorted.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of the a lot of thinking has to be done here at Imola, and even tracks like Portugal, Spain, where they've only got really one real DRS in. Of course, there is two at Spain, but it's difficult to use it down in towards turn 10 and really make a move there, especially with the newer track layout, as we see. Monza, he's going for a defensive line down into... Oh, and that's the send from CJQ on Rapid OG down in towards Variante Alta. I was just saying that Monza was taking a very defensive line and CJQ wasn't following him. But that's because Rapid was absolutely steaming down the inside and Donwar... Oh, no, sorry, CJQ was steaming down the inside of Rapid, and Donwar might have a look very shortly indeed. But we do now have a DRS train, clearly, from 3rd down to 7th. And we'll have to see how this all develops, but moves can be made now. Down into turn 1, Mythbusters on the back of Donwar.
Yeah, absolutely, and we saw how aggressive CJ was with that pass. Whether he knew he had the pace to be able to really try and put the challenge on Monster and catch back up to MZ is going to be something we're going to have to keep an eye out. But if CJ keeps taking these alternative lines, going off the racing line, collecting the marbles on his tyres, he will eventually start feeling the pain of those tyres getting degraded quicker and quicker in comparison to the likes of Rapid, who is currently sitting behind him, still following the racing line and forcing CJ to go off it to try and defend, to try and make his car a little bit more obnoxious, making that car a little bit wider, as we're going to see a free wide moment heading up here into Peratella. Very brave stuff from all of these drivers, and Rapid OG seems to have got a brilliant opportunity there, but CJ's got tagged on the rear. CJ got tagged by Monster, and I believe Monster might have lost a couple of positions out of that one as well.
The fact that neither of them are facing the wall or are in the wall
Miracle.
is an absolute miracle, though. Yeah, I can't believe that Monster, he's got wing damage, front left end plate absolutely disappeared off the car there. But he's got all 4 wheels on the car, which is not something I thought I'd say as the incident was happening. But it means that Rapid OG has been able to get away here from CJQ and Mythbusters, who nearly went straight into the back of the McLaren. All the while, the top 2, we're on lap 5 now. We finished 4 laps, and the gap is 6.3 seconds. They have been incredibly good at pulling that gap. It's almost absurd how much they've pulled. As Mythbusters, he's going to have to go off the track here to get past CJQ. He's got the inside line down in towards the Tamburello chicane. A little bit of contact, but just a little bit of rubbing his racing there as they run their way through Tamburello, but a bit of a poor exit there for Mythbusters. And CJQ's going to put his nose down the inside of Villeneuve. Is this going to end badly? Rapid OG's got a 3-second time penalty, and Mythbusters does have the position on CJQ, but CJQ really showing that if he sees a gap, he's going to go for it no matter what here.
Absolutely, and you know, you kind of got to respect the cojones on him for that as well. Around a track like Imola, where it's not often we get to see much wheel-to-wheel racing heading through the second sector, he's more than happy to put his McLaren in positions where the other drivers don't want him. He's more than happy to take that psychological battle of, hey, a very Max Verstappen-esque line, as we see him doing a lovely pirouette heading through Aqua Minerale. He's going to be rejoining the track in a safe manner, but of course he'll be rejoining down in P14, which is going to be a bit of a tragedy for his race there. But again, certainly we're seeing a couple drivers adopting that sort of Verstappen-esque technique, the old Michael Schumacher technique of, I'm going for an overtake, if you don't move out my way, it's going to be your problem, not mine. And, you know, in the modern age of racing, the modern age of sim racing as well, it can be quite refreshing to see drivers necessarily go for these battles. But again, it's about picking the time when you want to go for these battles. Because they've not necessarily picked it at the perfect opportunities, we've seen that gap to P1 and P2 widen and widen. And even look at Rapid OG, he's even been able to pull out a 4.5 second gap because of how hard the likes of Myth, Alfredo and CJ were all fighting, and the fights are still happening as we speak.
They are, they're up and down the field. There's just Komi-san and De Silva going at it down.
Don War's in the wall.
Villeneuve chicane, that's Don War into the wall. We've not yet got a safety car, and I think now we might just get away with the inside line, though, for SSR Halo, trying to make the move on PRL to Silva, down in towards Tosa, but that's not going to work out. And actually, he's going to come under pressure here from Cruise Steamers, who, of course, was in the race last night in Tier 1, possibly reserving for someone there, but he wasn't able to make the move, and he will stay down in P12. But yeah, whereas we've got quite big gaps at the front, this mid-pack from 5th, from 4th really, all the way down to about P15, they are quite close.
Alfredo's made a mistake. Yeah, Gopher's been able to find an opportunity heading out of Variante Alta. Alfredo made a mistake just going that little bit wide as well. But of course, once he went a little bit wide, he was smart enough. He had the racing IQ to realise that if he rejoined the track immediately, not only would he be putting his car at risk from colliding with Rapid, but he would also end up picking up a time penalty warning. So it would absolutely be an intelligent move. And very smart, very quick on his feet with Alfredo to understand he didn't want to pick up that warning so early on in this race. We've already got a 3-second time penalty for Rapid as well, which could play into these guys' hands as long as they're able to keep it clean. As we're seeing, all the drivers tend to really struggle to get a bit of heat in their tyres. Whether they've, under pressured the tyres slightly, feel like that could be something which we might have to try and discuss and find out for next week to see why all these drivers are really struggling for tractions. We've got an Alpine yet again in the background spinning in collateral zoom there. Might be having a collateral with the ball in a minute. Thankfully, I believe he's been able to recover it. It doesn't look like his front wing's got any damage as well, but we do have to take into consideration that all the damage in this game isn't 100% visible. We can see those 2, the 3, the 4% of damage on the front wing and it not show up as missing an end plate and such. And again, it will cost you time, and I believe you alluded to it yesterday, Darragh. The pit stops around here are so long. It's such a long pit lane, having to sit through and suffer and wait, especially given the opportunity now that we've got this mid-pack. If you want to fall out this mid-pack and necessarily try and replace a front wing or such, you're falling out with the DRS train, and overall, you will be losing pace to the guys, regardless of what set of tyres you decide to chuck on.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got different strategies. I mean, there were a couple of moments there on that last lap. I sat back in my chair. I'm glad that my chair, the back of it goes back a little bit, because really, they were so close to contact. I think Rapid Gopher's going to get through on Patty Pat down at turn 1, but look at this, 3 wide as they run. I think there's Crew Steamers getting through onto Silver just in behind, as we are looking at these guys fighting their way through. Tamburillo is just up in front as well. Komi-san overtaking Alfredo. So there's just moves aplenty up and down the field at the moment.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous trying to keep hold of this one and watching every single one of these drivers try and make their moves and their opportunities, because they're not pacing themselves, they're not necessarily relaxing in, they're not falling into the stereotype of a league race. They're more than happy to have these battles, and to this point as well, I might as well start considering that a couple of these drivers might have personal beefs with one another with how hard they're all fighting. As we see Patty Pat here, yet again within a tenth of Rapid Gopher making that move in Sector 1, in Sector 2. But again, you've got to start thinking, Patty Pat, is he just choosing to bide his time properly? Is he waiting for that opportunity to make a strike down that DRS straight, try and lose as little time as possible? And if so, why wouldn't Rapid want to try and work with him to break the toe from the rest of the drivers and catch back up to the likes of Rapid and MZ? Why would you want to battle that too hard?
It's a very good question. I mean, as well for Patty Pat, he's got to be thinking about his fuel light. I'm looking there at the bottom, and he looks like he has not got enough fuel at the moment to see him through to the end. So he'll definitely be hoping for a safety car of some sort, or will have to be starting to lift and coast throughout the race. I mean, just sitting in behind here, Rapid Gopher, just using that DRS, just being able to lift off down in towards turn 1 and in different spots around the track, it's going to help him out a little bit, and he'll maybe be able to attack even more post-safety car, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Lap 9 of 32, we're more than a quarter of the way through this race. De Silva's in the pit lane for a set of soft tyres. That's a bold move. He's not going to get to the end on those 4 wheels, that's for sure. It's wide from Patty Pat to Ratko Minerali. But all that's collateral out of the race. Is that going to cause a safety car? No. So we're getting away with some safety cars this evening, but collateral zoom, he has had collateral damage when he's out of the race. And yes, I just saw that. That's a Rapid Gopher having a moment.
Yeah, of course, with these moments, coming into play with these drivers and Patty Pat, wanting to save that little bit of extra fuel, lifting and coasting behind Rapid Gopher, not necessarily going for overtake, it's brought Komi-san back into the picture in the AlphaTauri. As you can see him hot on the heels there with that red Orleans sponsor on the back of the AlphaTauri. It's very hard to miss, and I'm sure Lewis Hamilton was very sick at looking at the rear of an AlphaTauri. But Patty Pat might be having to take a leaf out of Hamilton's book here and look at the back of that AlphaTauri if Komi-san decides he wants to try and get an overtake, because you've got to think the most preferential place to be out of the DRS train is in that 3rd position. Not only do you get the DRS from the car in front, you get that double slipstream effect as well, which is so much more powerful than just a single slipstream. As you see the Haas car taking it a little bit wide, but yet again, coming onto the track in, dare I say, a very cautious and safe manner, trying to straight line it as much as possible so he doesn't interfere with the line of Patty Pat and Komi-san as well. So, we're seeing a lot of moves. We're seeing a lot of very brave and bold moves, maybe a bit unorthodox as well. But again, they've got the wherewithal to understand not to just jump it straight back on the track in immediate fashion. They understand to take their time to make it back onto the track safely. not only for their sake, but also for the race's sake and for the other drivers they're competing against, which is lovely to see, and we don't always get to see in these league races.
Absolutely right. We're going to move for the lead, though, right at the front. You just turned to it there. Yeah, MZ Plays has got through on Finbob. Maybe a little bit of a mistake from Finbob out of the final corner. MZ with the DRS easily going to make that one stick, and he will carry on up the road. Komi-san, he has lost the DRS window to Patty Pat here. So Pat's been able to get away from the Alpha Tauri of just Komi-san at the moment. Rapid Gopher will be having a bit of a look at the Alpha Tauri, inside, outside. Oh, we thought about both as they ran down towards turn 1, but in the end, he's going to stick in behind and wait his time. Halo, Alfredo, and Craggy's are not far behind. Oh, and there's contact between the two behind. That's Craggy and Alfredo. They came together at the second part of Tamburello, and yeah, that's not going to help them out. Crew Steamers has come through, but like we said before, I mean, there's so many battles on track that we could look at that we don't know where to look at the moment.
No, it is. You know, it's almost impossible to be able to pick up a narrative here. I mean, looking here, we've got Vintage, who necessarily didn't get the best qualifying session, but has been able to keep pace with Craggy. He's been able to keep him honest, keep him under pressure. And dare I say, these drivers are struggling a little bit with the pressure from the cars behind. That's why we're starting to see a couple of these mistakes creep in, a little bit of contact here and there, because maybe they're not used to having these cars be able to use the DRS down a main straight and be able to reel them back in almost, well, dare I say, half a straight's time to really be able to try and put pressure heading down into the likes of Tamburello. And with that little bit of pressure which gets added to these drivers, it can cause a couple of mistakes. It can have a psychological effect on them, but it'll be about how the drivers are able to deal with it. I mean, take Finbot for example. He had a mistake down that start-finish straight. It's kept within the DRS, but you can already see both of their red lights are flashing on the ERS. And Darragh, I don't want to start cursing, but have you seen the sky? It looks a lot darker than it did at the start of this race.
Might be why we saw a lot of drivers go into the mediums rather than the hards. Because I was surprised when we looked at the pit stop strategies. It's maybe why De Silva's gone into the softs. Because he may not be wanting to get those to the end. He's trying to get to that intermediate phase of the race. And of course, when we get to the intermediate, DRS will not be enabled, and Imola becomes an even harder place to overtake. So, yeah, you're gonna want to make those moves before any rain starts to precipitate onto the racetrack. But we will see, because it has got very dark very, very quickly, hasn't it? So it looks like rain might be coming almost imminently, and that crossover period could lead us to a few more position changes as well, just to see when some of the drivers get onto an intermediate. But yeah, the big decisions I think are going to have to be made soon.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier before we started the stream, mentioning the fact that we didn't see any rain yesterday, and the fact that rain could play, if not more of an important role than what the safety cars did yesterday. Yes, the safety cars helped the drivers in an aspect of being able to sort out the strategy, but the rain could really help those which have decided to make that little window buffer and decided to really try and battle and hold on to their positions, which might be why we've seen a lot of very aggressive defensive driving from these cars, because they know as soon as that rain comes down, as soon as that DRS gets enabled, they're going to be forcing that other driver to burn a little bit more battery, as we see a little attempt there down the inside, but he's going to be looking to try and get that AlphaTauri straightened up before trying to make a move on Rapid Gopher. He's got the inside line here into Villeneuve. Surely you'd think the Haas would back out, and Gopher does probably the correct thing and backs out and lives to fight another day. You don't want to go too wide through Villeneuve, because it quite often ends in tears, but Gopher had the wherewithal there to kind of just realise the situation he was put in. And considering, there is a potential for rain here, there is, a chance that these drivers are aware of this rain coming. Maybe burning through your battery in this phase of a race wouldn't necessarily be the wisest idea, which could be the reason why we're seeing so many of these drivers in the midfield with slightly more battery than the likes of those who have tried to build that gap and try to pull away from the field. Maybe they're not as confident in the wet as some of these drivers are in the midfield.
Yeah, and in this midfield, we might see this shaken up a bit with a possible change to intermediate tyres. Of course, it can be so difficult to read the track. It's easier to read the track when it's getting wetter than when it's getting drier, of course, because you can start to see on the track little spots of rain start to emerge, and you can feel it a little bit better. Whereas when you get when it's going from wet to dry, it can be slightly difficult just to gauge exactly where it's going to go. Crew Steamers is coming into the pit lane. Not too sure what he's going on to. It can't be an intermediate tyre now. It hasn't even started raining. It was going on to a hard, which is interesting. Maybe it's not going to rain at all. Maybe it's just getting a little bit cloudy. So, We'll wait and see on that one. Oh, was Rapid go for up the scene, go very wide off the track, and the two Alpha Tauris are going to say thank you very much, and they're going to make their way through up into Tosa. But yeah, maybe that suggests that we're not expecting rain. If Cruise Team is going to a hard, maybe he's... I don't know. That's put me off now because I really thought we were expecting rain, but now with Cruise Team is going onto a hard tyre, it doesn't seem like he's expecting any.
Yeah, it's certainly perhaps throws for a little bit of a loop as well, but you've got to think as well, going onto that hard compound tyre, it's a bit of a brave move, considering it is overcast, we do have the clouds out, there's no sun on the track temperatures are going to be slightly colder. The air temperatures are going to be slightly colder as well, which gives them an opportunity to run closer and behind the car a little bit longer by having a little bit cooler air into the engine. They don't necessarily have to worry about the engine heating up too much, which could be the reason why we're seeing these DRS trains form and them using the slipstream in a much more effective manner compared to what we did yesterday, when the sun was out, when the engines might have been overheating slightly, when they might have been losing a little bit of power from the engines overheating. But certainly, you've got to think that going onto that hard compound tyre, it'll take at least 2 laps to really get back up to temperature into an operating window where they can start pushing that hard compound tyre before, you know, necessarily burning out the tyre and chucking it all the way up, trying to force that tyre to heat up and causing a few issues here and there throughout by forcing the tyre to get to a stage where it's able to be used in a, you know, a racing style and being able to really try and push the lap time out of that tyre. It'll cause the tyre a lot of damage, and that's what these drivers don't want. But, you know, they're sitting there almost at the halfway point of this Grand Prix. They want to be able to chuck it onto a set of hards and be able to comfortably run it on a comfortable pace until the end of this session. So they're going to have to take a little bit more time nurturing those tyres, given the colder conditions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does seem like it's getting brighter again. There we go. I can see some shadows on the track. So yeah, yeah, it's getting brighter once again. So maybe that rain, that was never going to come. As we've seen, oh, that's a retirement. That's CJQ, and that's just before the pit lane. It's a bit of a weird place to crash, actually. But we do see the top two into the pit lane, onto a hard compound tyre. We see Mythbuster in as well. We're going to see just Komi-san into the pit lane following along. SSR Halo, he started in P19. He's about to try and get his way through on Patty Pat, which will promote him up to P2, but he's still going to be P3 at the end of the straight regardless. Backs off a little bit by the end, and Patty Pat will defend his P2 position. But, I mean, look at this. MZ Plays and Finbop have come out in P4 and P5. I mean, Patty Pat and Halo were fighting legitimately over, I think it was 6th and 7th. Yes. And they're only 2 seconds behind. Their pace so far this evening has been incredible. You
know, it's almost been on another level, but we do have to mention as well, they have used a little bit more battery. So if they're not careful, and if we don't get this safety car, which we had quite a bit of last night, which bailed a couple drivers out on the ERS front, it could potentially spell maybe a little bit of disaster heading into the later stages of these races if they're not able to keep that distance and keep pulling away, or if they end up even getting caught into a little bit of traffic here, because you've got to be aware, Mythbusters, yes, he's 10 seconds behind, you know, the gaggle of cars which Finbop and MZ are in, but if SSR Halo and Patty Pat decide to hang it out for a couple more laps, MZ and Finbop could definitely be vulnerable to potentially getting hung up a little bit. And dare I say as well, if a safety car was to come out now, it would certainly help out those drivers like Rapid OG, like Patty Pat, like Halo, who are still out on track, but I don't suppose they'll be out for too much longer. But Patty Pat dives into the pits and Halo decides to stick it out. He's going to be going for an overcut. It's a very bold decision on this year's game, but is it the right one? Maybe doing the opposite to Patty Pat, just trying to get a little bit of track position from an overcut could potentially play dividends, but again, it's one of those things where we're going to have to wait and see how quickly those hard tyres are able to get fired up and get into a window where they're able to extract the pace from.
Yeah, and it's going to be important here for MZ Place to try and get through on Halo. I mean, Halo's going to be doing a bit of a hold-up job at the moment, and now as he's got through, can Finbop follow him through? You bet he can. A much better traction out of Tosa. And Finbop, he was 1.5 seconds behind MZ Place when they came out of the pit lane, and worrying maybe about a DRS window, but he's back inside that 1 second, and as long as he just keeps it together over the next few corners through Aquamorale, through the Variante Alta, he'll be able to pick up a DRS, and actually it's MZ who's made a little mistake, if anything. So these two still fighting out. Finbop's penalty's really going to handcuff him at the moment with MZ with a clean slate, but these two really, they're fighting over the win. If there's a safety car, others might be dragged into it, but without a safety car, it's going to be MZ versus Finbop here.
Yeah, and if you are Finbop, what sort of strategy do you go for here? Because You've both made your pit stops, identical laps, he's matched you, you have a time penalty. Do you want to sit behind MZ? Do you really want to go for this overtake? Do you want to start trying to put pressure on MZ to try and make him make a mistake? Or do you want to do as Finbob has done, get past and really start trying to push the limits of the car, burn more ERS, try and pull away from MZ and build up that 3-second gap? Because we saw it earlier at the start of the race, he is capable of building that gap. But it's just whether MZ is going to be able to keep hold of that DRS and just follow him through until the last stage of this race. And we could very well see perhaps what we saw last night for our last lap overtake, even though it might not necessarily be needed, but finishing ahead on track, of course, is probably going to be their preferred method, as all these drivers are competitors deep down. All of them are sim racers and all of them want to get that first win on the track to kick off their season.
And a good start to the season can be so important. Of course, momentum is a really important factor in F1 leagues, especially when you're going through, maybe it's a few tracks that they aren't your favourite, they aren't your best, but if you've got confidence, that really can do so much to help you through the races. And we'll have to see if anybody will be benefiting from a little bit of a confidence boost in the coming few weeks. The likes of Finbob, the likes of MZ, who really have shown how quick they can be. We've only got Alfredo, who is yet to pit. Monster as well, you'd have to say, on those hard tyres in P6. Maybe going to stop again. I mean, you'd likely to stop again, because otherwise he'd be going 26, 27 laps on those tyres. But he doesn't have to. There's only one driver who has to. That's Alfredo. He's coming in now. And it just shows how big the gap is between Finbob and even P4. I mean, off the podium, the leader, Finbob, has got 18 seconds to P4. That's a massive gap in 18 laps.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, you said it, it's a massive gap, and it's certainly going to be something that Finbob will be able to take confidence in and take it into Catalunya for next week as well. It'll be something that he's going to be able to look back on and think, right, how did I do this right? I qualified well, I got a great getaway, and I was able to manage my pace up at the front of the field in order to build that buffer, to get a safe window, so where, you know, if there is a safety car which comes out, he does have that tiny bit of a buffer where he has got that safe netting if he needs to make another pit stop, to be able to dive it in the pits and not pay too much for it. He will fall down a couple positions here and there, probably looking to come out around P7, P8, but again, the trade-off for a fresh set of tyres, we mentioned how quick and how flowing the circuit is. A fresh set of rubber can go a long, long way. And I'm sure that's something that SSR Halo is going to be looking to try and capitalise on here. Currently 1.9 seconds off the back of Patty Pat, but he is on a lap fresher tyres. And both him and Patty Pat are on fresher tyres from the two cars in front of them. So it could be something that both of these drivers are looking to try and capitalise on by going back a little bit longer on the medium tyres to get themselves in a window now where throughout the rest of his race, they should theoretically be the quicker cars compared to those in front of them.
And so I've just seen Monster come into the pit lane as well. So you're absolutely right. With everybody now getting onto the hard tyres, realistically to the end of the race, it's only Crazy in P15 who's on the mediums, but he is now a lap down. Craggy's fastest lap, nearer the back, and he is on a hard tyre. So he's showing he's had pace. He didn't have the best of starts, of course. Got a little bit caught up in some traffic. I think a few collisions have really cost him quite a good chance at good points in this race, but clearly showing some good pace in that McLaren car, so maybe he can pick up a few more, the likes of Halo, Patty Pat, Crew Steamers as well. But it's interesting to see as well the undercuts for the likes of Crew Steamers, because of course he pitted 3-4 laps earlier than the cars just behind him, and he's come out in front. He was quite a few positions back. I think he came into the pit lane about P10, P9, but he's come out and he's ahead of the guys who were P5, P6 for the pit stop, so it's worked out well on the undercut for Crew Steamers, but we'll just have to see if he can hold up Patty Pat and Halo with the DRS that they're going to have. It's going to be difficult, I would have thought, but this is, I think, the main battle that's brewing now.
Absolutely. I like to call it a George Russell strategy, diving in for that undercut. The undercut on this year's game is so powerful. If you've not had the great joy of experiencing it, you're experiencing it now. Crew Steamers got a massive undercut, jumped up 3, 4, 5 positions from it, and now he's going to be trying to adopt that George Russell sort of strategy. Perhaps calling it a George Russell strategy around Imola might not be the best of luck to Crew Steamers, because of course George has had many instances here, but the sort of technique that the Mercedes outfit like to do in real life is get George onto a fresh set of tyres nice and early to get that track position, and then trust in George's defence to hold up the rest of the pack just to ensure that he is able to battle, and maybe even bring, you know, his teammate in. But of course, for Crew Steamers here, his teammate's down in P12, so this will be defending purely for him to be able to hold on to this P7. And realistically, you've got to think, around a track like Imola, without the aid of DRS, it'll be very, very difficult to overtake. So as long as he's able to keep Patty Pat at that buffer, as long as he's able to deploy the battery in the correct circumstances, coming out of Aqua Minerale, coming out of Varianta Alta, coming out the last couple corners as well, he should be able to maintain that buffer of a second to Patty Pat for maybe another 1 or 2 laps, which might be enough until they start getting to that graining phase on that hard tyre, where the tyres aren't going to be too happy, they're not going to be friendly to you, they won't want to, you know, stick to the surface, they won't want to go with the car, they won't want to turn in, they don't want to go late on the brakes. And it'll certainly be one of those things where Crew Steamers will be counting down the laps until the end of the Grand Prix, because at the minute he could be looking in a vulnerable position, but of course it all depends on the ability and his confidence in defending, which again, we mentioned before, it's a key theme of the championship. Crew Steamers obviously raced last night as well. Wouldn't have been, you know, necessarily one of his best races, but he might have been able to build up a little bit of confidence there, knowing where drivers are going to want to overtake and being able to pick his position on the circuit to really try and defend and not lose as much time as he would necessarily by diving it to the inside of a corner, by going onto a very defensive line, just positioning his car maybe on the middle of a track, for example, heading through Tosa, making it very awkward for Patty Pat to try and find a way around him. But as we say, that Patty Pat is closed within a second now, and you've got to assume Patty Pat is going to keep closing in throughout this second sector because he is on that fresher compound of tyre.
Yeah, and of course with everybody on the hards, it's pretty much there isn't going to be too much of a pace advantage for anybody here. Of course, once you get into that rhythm on that hard tyre, once it gets into the groove, it's gone through the first few laps, you really don't see much drop-offs in lap time for quite a long time. So even though the likes of Crew Steamers have got 4-lap older tyres than SSR Halo, they're not going to be that much slower. Slower in real terms. But yeah, I mean, for the guys up front, like we've said, Finbot might be trying to pull that gap. 1.7 seconds is that gap now at the top. And he is trying to pull it. Of course, he's got that time penalty to his name. It's only a 3-second, but you know, they add up. If he gets another one, he could be in a bit of trouble. But he's trying to pull. We see Halo and Patty Pat going at it, as you see on all of your screens. Halo getting through on Patty Pat down into the Tambrella chicane, and he is now going to be the one to try and challenge Crew Steamers. But we're in a bit of a holding pattern now, aren't we?
Yes,
Josh, because we've gone through the pit stop phase. We're now onto this hard strategy. But people don't really want to throw away a good result now, so they're going to wait a few more laps, and I think we might see a little bit of action in the closing 5 laps or so.
Absolutely, they're going to have to pick those battles very carefully. If they end up rushing too quickly into a battle, all it'll take is one of the cars just to sit back a little bit, recharge the battery for maybe 1 or 2 laps, and then looking forward towards the last lap of the race and trying to get that overtake, heading down this main straight. But something we should probably note there as well is Crew Steamers picking up a 3-second time penalty. Yet again, the penalties have been in force here today, haven't they? Finbot with that 3 seconds, as we mentioned, in the lead of this race. He's going to have to keep trying to pull that gap to MZ players. MZ is doing a fantastic job holding on to the back of him, especially given MZ doesn't have the DRS aid that some of the other drivers would have had, for example, like last night. We've got Rapid OG with a 3-second time penalty. Doesn't look like it'll affect his race too much as long as he's able to keep that buffer. Then we've got Komi-san with 8 seconds worth of penalties, Crew Steamers with 3 seconds, Alfredo with 3 seconds, Monster with 3 seconds, and Crazy I Do It with 3 seconds as well.
Yeah, less penalties I think than we saw yesterday, or about the same. Not any more than we saw last night, but they are a little bit more interspersed with quite a few of the drivers. We've only got P14 and 15, Monster and Crazy, who've got penalties next to each other, so we could see a few drivers picking up some positions. Sometimes if you see a block of drivers with a penalty, they all just move down together. Maybe one driver jumps up 3 or 4 places, but here we might see the likes of Crew Steamers losing out a couple of positions, Patty Pat gaining 1, or you know, MZ gaining a position as well, but just the odd 1 or 2 here and there at the moment. So nothing major, but we're just about to complete 3/4 of this race now, because Finbot has come around to start lap 25. I mean, we're looking at Patty Pat in P8 and P9. He's coming around Aqua Minerale, while Finbot is going down the start-finish straight. And it just shows how incredible that the pace has been from the front guys in this race. Rapid, ever since about lap 6-7, when he got away from the group, really has just run a race on his own. But at the moment, he's going to be pulling home for bringing home a podium, not putting home a podium, bringing home a podium. But this battle back here between Craggy and Patty Pat is really starting to heat up. We saw Craggy had really good pace with that fastest lap, and he's really starting to show it even more now.
Yeah, and it just goes to show how... We talked about the undercut being very powerful in order to get the track position, but again, the overcut is showing its hand. It's not exactly a one and done of the undercut's going to be the quickest way through, as we see the likes of Craggy and Halo both on a single lap fresher tyres. That's all it takes to be able to make, you know, an overcut necessarily work on those around you, and Patty Pat is ultimately suffering because Craggy's and Halo are both on a lap fresher tyres. It might not seem like a lot, but you've got to think that'll be a whole extra lap that these guys are able to go before hitting that degradation wall, before hitting the cliff face of these tyres, and that'll give them an opportunity to be able to build that gap, and then it puts them in the defensive position heading through when their tyres are going through that degrading phase, when they're not going to feel their best, when they might start losing a little bit of grip here and there, before they all kind of end out equally. So it's going to be very important for Craggy now to be able to get through on Crew Steamers and do a very similar job as what Halo has done, and be able to build that little bit of a gap for when those hard tyres hit that cliff face and end up falling off the face of planet Earth, and Patty Pat's come back into an operating window. That'll be when having these cars in between of like Crew Steamers, and even to perhaps an extent of Craggy's for Halo's sake, making it very awkward for Patty Pat just to try and get that car back past these guys when he has an opportunity to do so.
You're absolutely right. Craggy now, though, through on Crew Steamers, and he will now be trying to chase after Halo. And I think he might be closing this gap down relatively quickly, actually, on the AlphaTauri driver. He really has shown some good pace, seeing a move for P4 as well. Just Komi-san making his way past the Haas of Mythbusters. But Mythbusters knows that if he can stay in that DRS and keep the car within the white lines, he'll be able to pick up that P4 with the penalty to the AlphaTauri driver. But running our way through now, Mythbusters, though.
Oh,
what did I say?
Darragh, can't believe you're cursing the drivers here. Once again, yesterday it was me with a safety car. Today it's you with time penalties. It's the commentator's curse. Once again, having to apologise to all the drivers. We'll put in a strongly worded email to the stewards and say it was our fault. I'm not sure they're going to see it our way, though, to be honest with you. But someone who is certainly seeing it his way is going to be Patty Pat all over the back of Crew Steamers now. 3-lap fresher tyres for the Alpine driver, looking to try and hunt down his Aston Martin. But once again, you can see he's gaining the time in the middle sector, but coming out of these chicanes, for whatever reason, Crew Steamers seems to be able to get a beautiful little bit of traction coming out of Variant Auto. Whether, you know, he might be deploying a little bit of battery, but he's certainly been able to keep that little bit of a buffer, which is going to make it a little bit more difficult for Patty Pat to get past. But of course, you come back to this DRS straight, you come back to the slipstream. How powerful is it? Realistically, you're looking at, what, 5 attempts being able to catch up, and even then, you know, Patty Pat, he's found himself in an unfortunate position now where he's kind of in the middle of no man's land. Yes, he's got the Aston Martin for company, but then you look at the likes of Craggy's and you look at the like of Halo, who he was racing initially, and they've just been able to get past Crew Steamers and build a gap, and that's not going to be something Patty Pat's going to be looking at too happily towards the end of this race. He'll be wondering why he wasn't able to make the move on Crew Steamers, why he wasn't able to follow through and keep touch with the likes of Craggy's and Halo, and that'll be something that he's certainly going to want to reflect on come the end of this race.
As Craggy picks up a 3-second time penalty, but yeah, that's it's gonna hinder his progress a little bit, you would say. But yeah, quite a few drivers now having penalties, more than half of the field, of course. 9 of the 15 drivers, that was very quick adding up from me. 9 of the 15 drivers having penalties at the moment. Still 4.5 laps, or 5 laps in most of these drivers' cases to go. Just to see if anybody picks up another. Finbop is pulling that gap though at the front. He's been quietly going about it as we see side-by-side action down in towards Tamburello, Komi-san and Rapid, Mythbusters, I should say, sorry, going through. But Mythbusters holds that P4, and as they both have penalties, this really is a fight for position with only 4 more visits to the Tamburello. Again, a little bit wide at the Villeneuve chicane, as they run their way through Toza side by side, but Mythbusters is going to have that position, and Komi-san trying to find another way through. But I was just saying that Finbop, 2.1 seconds is that gap at the front. 2/10 a lap could see him out of that 3-second window and win this race.
Yeah, but realistically, is it going to be feasible for this Ferrari driver to do so? We see his red light flashing on the ERS. He's got to be very, very careful on the track limits as well, because if he ends up picking up another 2 warnings, he will again get a 3-second time penalty, which will definitely end his chance of being able to win this race. But he's certainly been going about it, hasn't he? He's been keeping that distance. It was 1.5 seconds a couple laps ago. It's now up to 2 seconds. If he's able to keep chipping away at these lap times and keep just reducing it more and more, finding that little bit of extra pace that maybe MZ isn't necessarily looking at pushing because he doesn't want to pick up a penalty, it could very well go in Finbop's favour that he's willing to risk that little bit more, because as it stands, right, he's still finishing P2. He can afford to go and risk getting another 3-second time penalty by using a little bit more of a track limit, because he'll still be getting a P2 regardless. But for MZ, he could potentially be looking at a win. He doesn't want to take the risks. He doesn't want to abuse the track limits as much, because he could potentially be looking at getting this win here. Because if he picks up a 3-second time penalty, he's given himself an awful lot of work to do to catch back up to Finbop and overtake him with only 3 laps to go in this race.
Yeah, and Finbop really is going to be doing his absolute best to try and pull that gap. The cars really are spaced out at the moment. The only 2 drivers within any kind of DRS window are Komi-san and Mythbusters in 4th and 5th at the moment. Everybody else very evenly spaced out around the track, particularly at the moment between Tosa and Piratella, with Halo leading that little train of cars. But
it's like a qualifying session.
It is, isn't it? Everyone just sitting their lap times on their own, giving themselves a little bit of space. And, going about their session.
I love the saying for drivers to run their own race. And I feel like they've took this one a little bit too literally, because all of them seem to very much be running their own race in their own little bubble, in their own little window, without the aid of DRS. But again, it's something that these drivers might need to get used to, heading to the circuits like Catalunya, like Portimao, where it can be a little bit difficult to be able to encourage closer racing, tighter racing. It'll be definitely more of a chess match. It won't be an all-out brawl. It won't be a boxing match. But someone who did want a boxing match there was Mythbusters, who ended up deciding to pick up a fight with Koni-san. And I'm sure that stewards are going to be taking a little look at that one, because to me that looked a little rough for Mythbusters there to be able to deal with. But dare I say, he's fallen into a trap here. And now Craggy's, as we mentioned, very quick driver, still currently holds the fastest lap, is right on his heels.
We'll have to see if he can find his way through on Mythbusters, because, it just compounds your misery a little bit, especially when you've lost a few positions, and then here comes another driver raring to go. They're smelling blood in the water. They're just getting through, I think, on the Williams of Crazy there on the soft tyre. He is, of course, a lap down. But, it's gonna be difficult here, I think, for Mythbusters to defend. Craggy, of course, not got too much in the energy store. You can see on the steering wheel that's not the fullest of bars, but it's also, you can see a little bit of battery to his advantage. But 2 more laps to go, then 2 more trips to the Tamburello, which you'd obviously say is the best overtaking opportunity for these guys to make the move. But let's see, Craggy out of Ravazza 2, he's going to use that DRS down towards turn 1. How close is he going to get? 7/10 it was when he opened that DRS. Let's see how close he does get. That's 6, it's 5, it's closing to 4, it's going to be 3. So there you go, yeah, half a second he's gained there. Down the straight with DRS, no ERS, just DRS usage, half a second. That's going to start to worry Mythbusters.
And Darragh, did you notice how cautiously Mythbusters took the Tamburello chicane there? Maybe having a little knock of his confidence with that little incident that he had with Komi-san. Just taking it a little bit easier, not carrying as much speed through there to make sure that when he did hit the curb, he wasn't necessarily going to end up losing the rear of a car once again. And, I mean, realistically, he's doing exactly what he needs to do, because, of course, both these drivers have a penalty. And if Craggy is, if he's going to be forced into these sort of mistakes, like we just saw there through Piratella, it could be looking very good for Myth to hold on to this position. But, again, they have to go through that DRS straight once again. And someone who's done it for the final time and also picked up another 3-second time penalty is Finbot. But Craggy's has also picked up another 3-second time penalty slightly further down the field as well.
Yeah, he bounced over the first part of Variante and picked up that warning on the inside, I do believe. So it's really not worked out for him very well. And Patty Pat is definitely going to be smelling blood in the water, because he's only 3 seconds behind Craggy. But Craggy will almost certainly fly through on Mythbusters with the DRS here. A little bit of ERS to kick him along as well. There he goes, inside line, through the opening little kink of the racetrack. And there he is, up into P7. But those penalties are going to cost him. Crazy is going crazy, going through some of these drivers. Not going to be going to be a little distracting for them, but We are on the final lap. We're into the final sector in the lead of this race because Finbob and MZ really have been the class of the field. They are 23 seconds and 24 for Finbob ahead of P4. They have been really, really dominant in this race. But even though Finbob's going to win it on track, MZ, he's kept it within the white lines. So even though Finbob's going to come across the line to cross the line first, face the checkered flag, it's going to be MZ who wins here at Imola and will take the championship lead from the opening round of PRL Season 12 here in Tier 2. And MZ is your winner. Finbob P2 and Rapid OG will come through Rawatsa to the final corner, run up to the line, and he will finish on the bottom step of the podium. But a very dominant race for those three drivers, and they really have set a precedent for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. They're going to certainly be ones to watch come the other legs of the track. Kobe-san yet again picking up a 5-second penalty for an unsafe penalty. That's going to promote Rapid Gopher up into P4. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see Halo also potentially getting a little bit closer, as we're going to see the penalties now coming through and the positions changing. We've got Halo P6, Mythbusters P7, Craggy's P8, Patty Pat P9. And then, of course, we're going to have the likes of Crew Steamers, Alfredo, Monster coming across the line as well, all with penalties. So I'll be interested to see how this one's going to play out. Crew Steamers finishes P10, Alfredo P11, Monster P12. Oh, sorry, Alberto P12, Monster P13. And then, of course, we've got Vintage. And then Crazy as well, who's looking to try and set that fastest lap here on the soft compound tyre.
Which I think he did, but of course he was a lap down, but I do believe he said it on the final lap. He used the DRS very nicely on that final lap just to push him along. But what a race that was in the end. The driver of the day has been given to Halo. But Josh, you in agreement with that? Because I would agree with Halo because he started P19.
Yeah, it was a very good race. But as well, I feel like a lot of these drivers did a fantastic job. But to me, it's got to be the Red Bull, obviously. Stayed within the white lines. He did a fantastic job, and there he is parading around his flag of South Africa. It was a brilliant piece of work. It was intelligent racing. It was understanding, maybe learning a little bit from last night, maybe watching the stream, maybe picking up that drivers did get penalties around here, and that in order to be able to maximise the potential of his race pace, he might not be the quickest outright on the circuit, but he was definitely the one who showed, a level of racecraft, a level of racing IQ to be able to secure himself a well-deserved win here as well. But you've got to think, around Catalonia, with the track limits being a little bit more friendly, could he be in a little bit of trouble? Will he have to put in a couple extra hours worth of practice to hold on to the likes of Finbob's pace? But we do have MZ once again winning this race and having a brilliant start to his season, with Finbob yet again picking up P2. After starting on pole, the penalties didn't really help him out too much, but he'll be looking to change that for next week. We've got Rapid OG in P3, Rapid Goofer in P4, Kobe-san P5, Halo P6, Mythbusters P7, Craggy's in P8, Patty Pat P9, Crew Steamers in P10, Alfredo P11, Alberto P12, Monster P13, Vintage 14, Crazy iDot, who did get the fastest lap in P15, T Silver, who DNF from a race, CJ, yet again another DNF, Collateral Zoom, DNF, Don War as well with a DNF. Very unfortunate there for those four drivers, but you've got to think, after that result, the only way is up for him. And heading into Catalonia, and heading into, the new layout of the Spanish circuit, it certainly helps create more competitive racing.
Yeah, hopefully so. We might see some overtakes down into turn 1 there, but for now, it's been a good opening couple of races here at Imola in Tier 1 and Tier 2. Of course, last night we had Tier 1, tonight we had Tier 2. But we will be back, myself and Josh, next week when we go to Catalonia. As we've mentioned, it'll be Tuesday, once again, 9:30 for Tier 1 and 10 o'clock, or UK times, I should say,
yes.
For Tier 2. I feel very used to
in the evening as well. In the evening. This hasn't been going on for over 12 hours. We're just clarifying for you guys.
Yeah, just, obviously that's what, 4:30 and 5 Eastern in the evening, and 1:30 and 2 Pacific time in America as well. And they're the conversions I know. But either way, we'll be back then next week. We thank everyone who has been watching the opening couple of streams here in PRL. We hope you've enjoyed them, and we are looking forward to Spain next week. But between now and then, we hope you enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend. And we will see you next Tuesday when PRL Tier 1 returns at the circuit to Barcelona, Catalonia.
Until then, goodbye. There you go. Stopped.